39. Oh, we hit 40. There we go.
Okay,
so welcome everyone back to Grand Rounds. Hope you had a good summer. Back to school, back to Grand Rounds, like we were saying, and we've got a interesting and timely one to start with, and want to welcome Adam and Shifra. So I'll introduce them in a second, but as always, want to acknowledge that we are built on the unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and that the peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land, as well as all other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So today's topic is, as you see, AI in healthcare, smart clinics, or just Smartish. So there's a provocative title, so looking forward to the presentation. From Dr. Adam Byrne, who's originally from St. John's, and then worked in the public health labs in St. John before going to medical school at Memorial, pediatric residency at CHEO, and then fellowship in allergy and immunology at McGill. And now he's here in Ottawa and works in both community and at CHEO with allergy and immunology. And he has a strong provincial, national, and international stature in this area. Shifra is the AI program director at the CHEO, and so the key role in the development of CHEO's AI principles and framework. And if you haven't looked at that, I think it's really worthwhile looking at it. I don't know, I feel kind of proud that we as an institution put the work into that, and it's really quite good. And the subcommittee of the Digital Health Steering Committee, which supports the hospital intake process for AI solutions and helps ensure alignment with these principles and framework. In this role, she's involved with evaluating tools, addressing questions about AI use, and supporting AI implementation on the hospital side. She also supports a range of AI projects across both CHEO and the CHEO. So I wanted to read her whole bio/intro there so that you know her role, and if you're having thoughts or ideas, especially around that intake process, she would be someone to reach out to. So with that, I'm going to hand over to whoever's going first. I think that maybe Alan. Okay, there you go.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and healthcare use. So these are my disclosures. What I want to point out here is that none of the companies that have provided me with any compensation are actually involved in the use of AI, at least clinically. I know some of the drug companies are using them, as you'll see, for things like drug development. I will let you know that one of the programs that I do bring up a little bit today is an AI scribe. I do spend a lot of time with them, so they have asked me to be an advisor in certain capacities. And this presentation was created with the partial use of AI, in the sense that the media I'm going to show you is AI generated, was obviously created by AI, but the presentation itself was all me. Maybe the title was AI. And then for Shifra, I will just let you know that she also has no conflicts of interest, and there's no financial relationships or affiliations leading to any of her opinions changing today. So the objectives we kind of want to discuss today a little bit is that by the end of this presentation, actually, attendees should be able to outline the strategic framework guiding AI adoption at CHEO. It's going to be nice to know exactly where the hospital is in terms of adapting some of the tools we're going to talk about today. We want to understand some of the risks, the challenges, the cautionary tales surrounding AI. And then we're going to explore some of the AI tools that are actually being used right now in clinics across Canada, North America, and the world. Before we start, though, I think part of the challenge when we talk about AI is that it has become this huge touchstone moment in the early, 2020s type of thing. And understanding that everybody approaches technology and AI with various different approaches. So, for example, there is a lot of people are going to come and be like, oh, AI, I know a lot about it. I've spent a lot of time. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but there will also be some people that will see it's a talk by me and be like, oh, is it allergy and immunology? What is this AI thing standing for? And so as a disclosure, I'm going to be really upfront. I am not a computer scientist. I used to be a tech guy when Pentiums were a thing, which I think was when, I'm not even going to say when it was in terms of the relation to my age, because that will age me. But it's, we're getting to the stage now where the newer generation is not going to understand what the icon for save means, because floppy disks don't really exist anymore. So what I kind of wanted to start off with today is to get a little bit of a ground floor understanding of AI, so we can all have a little bit of an understanding of what it is, what it isn't, and how it's developed to get to the point where we are today. And so this is kind of some of the artificial intelligence milestones. Now, despite the fact that the past 5 years we've seen this rapid expansion, the concept of AI has been around for a long time. Alan Turing had published in 1950 the concept of the Turing test, and this is a test to determine if it's an assessment of intelligence for computers, where an individual shouldn't be able to differentiate between responses to certain questions from a computer versus other people. It was the first concept that maybe computers to get to this stage. In 1956, at the Dartmouth Conference, this was the first time that the term artificial intelligence in relation to actual computers was initiated or created. From the 1950s to the 1990s, there was a bit of a lull. We just didn't have the technological capability to get to the stage where we were today. But in the 1980s, they did start to have some programs that simulated human expertise, that seemed to be experts in the field, even though they didn't think about it. 1997 was one of the first touchstones, again, where the IBM Deep Blue computer defeated chess champion Garry Kasparov in a chess match. And if you've ever played chess, it's a game of strategy and anticipation. And so this is a big deal because a computer could now anticipate some of the moves that his opponent was going to make and be able to tackle them and plan appropriately. In 2012, AI began to regularly outperform humans in the concept of image recognition. In 2016, in another game, AI defeated Go champion Lee Sedol. Now, Go is a much different game than chess. It's still about conquest and possession of territories, but it's a lot more intuitive. There's a lot more nuance to the game. And so this was also a big deal because at that point in time, what you would see is that there is it had to anticipate even some of the emotions that their player might have. In 2020, GPT-3 was released. So this was the first LLM, or local large language model, excuse me, that generated human-like text at scale proportions. This is the first time that they could actually have this as an open app. And then this is what happened in 2023. This led to the creation of ChatGPT, which is probably the most famous or well-known of the AI interfaces that people typically use. It took off pretty quickly. Netflix took 3 years and 5 months to get to 1 million subscribers. Spotify took 2 years to get to 1 million subscribers. The pretty ubiquitous iPhone, when it was first released, took 74 days to see 1,000 units sold. ChatGPT had 1,000 registered users in 5 days. So this exploded pretty quickly. And this is 2023. And then since that point in time, we've seen this massive explosion, this obsession even. There's since 2023, 1.8, almost 2 million AI-related scholarly articles have been published, which is an increase of 35% since 2021. It's a 4-year difference. On Spotify, a band called the Velvet Sundown has 1.2 million monthly listeners. They don't exist. They're an AI-generated music band. In 2023, an AI-generated image of Pope Francis wearing a puffer jacket fooled millions. And if you haven't seen it, that's what it looks like. And I want to leave this up for a second because this isn't some photoshopped image where someone cut a head off using Photoshop and placed it directly on the puffer jacket. This is someone typing into an AI image generator saying, hey, I'd like to see what Pope Francis looked like in a puffer jacket. And this is what it produced. And while fascinating, it was also a little bit alarming that really with little bits of knowledge, people can start producing pretty realistic images without a whole lot of know-how. With this type of generative AI, now these tools are being used in 1/3 of business companies across the world. So this has now become an essential tool for business. And really, the rise of NVIDIA is probably a really good indication of how fast this has taken off. For those who don't know, NVIDIA is a chip maker. It makes graphical processing units. If you played video games on your computer, if you used CGI in movies, it was made because you started to have some of these chips from NVIDIA. And they were a pretty successful company. 5 years ago, they had a market cap of $323 billion. It put them anywhere, depending on the time of the year, between the 15th and 20th most valuable company in the world. What they were working on, though, was creating the databases, the architecture upon which AI has been built. And now these are the NVIDIA architecture, their mainframes are essentially considered the architecture, excuse me, upon which AI is now used throughout the world. It's changed their value a bit. So now their market cap is $4.4 trillion. It has made them the most valuable company in the world. It is actually 25% higher than Microsoft. And when we think of these monolithic companies, when we look at companies like Amazon and Google, Nvidia is now worth than both of those companies combined. I hope you bought stock 5 years ago because you'd be in pretty good shape. But this has led to a lot of created questions. And so, we have this type of concept where depending on the article you look at and when you look at it and what it's talking about, AI is presented either as the savior that's going to lead to this utopia. All of our lives are going to be changed. We're going to be sitting back in our chairs while machines do everything for us. There's some people who think it's a bit more of a sideshow, all of these computers that are anticipating being able to kind of tackle human tasks and, well, failing. My kids found this slide really funny. And then there's this question of will it rule the world? Is it going to turn into Skynet and will Terminators suddenly take over and massacre us all? And the real answer is none of those things, but also some of those things. So what is artificial intelligence? It's defined as an information technology that performs tasks ordinarily requiring biological brain power. And this includes targeting things such as understanding spoken language or learning behaviors or solving problems. The core of these things is these are LLMs or large language models. So these are enormous databases of literally trillions of words, sentences that are pieced together. Similar words in this model are given a numerical representation for the LLM. And so, for example, doctor and nurse would have a similar connotation. So they are created in the same vector, whereas doctor and banana are much more separate. So they're not as well associated. The neural networks or the transformers that then actually review these LLMs when a query is put to it will actually rapidly go through this numerical assessment to predict what the next best response would be. And then the real impressive part about this is one, they can analyze these vectors, billions of them at a time, and they can also respond to millions of responses at a time. Pretty fascinating. And it does bring up this philosophical question of what, how do we think about things? But it doesn't mean that AI is intelligent or thinks in a traditional sense that we would consider. So when you do a comparison from a human intelligence perspective, it's intuitive, it's creative, we have the ability for reflective thought. Artificial intelligence doesn't necessarily do that. What artificial intelligence does, it looks at the millions upon billions of generated data it can review and says, based on what I know, what is the next predictive best response or letter or sentence to create? It also has, we have the ability in theory to learn, so does AI. One of the things that we do pretty well is we do tend to consider change. If people present us with new information, we tend to incorporate that maybe, depending on how stubborn we are, a little bit better than AI sometimes does. Because again, if I provide an alternate viewpoint to AI, it's got to balance what I just said against millions of other people. And the other thing is that, generally speaking, unless you're on the internet, when we are presented with new information, we do have a tendency to try to adapt our viewpoint. Artificial intelligence won't challenge you. Artificial intelligence is designed for you to use it. It's how these companies make money. And they don't make money if they counteract your points all the time. So they're actually designed to be agreeable. And people have kind of gotten into trouble with some of this stuff. So this does lead to the question, well, is AI great? Like, is it as good as we think it is? It depends. One of the things that AI cannot do well is math. I mean, basic math, sure, it's fine. But the more complex your equation is, the more complex the actual assessment that the LLM or the AI has to be. So it does really poor performance tasks on things like geometry, calculus, and multi-step algebra. It's because they don't calculate. They're not using the symbols that we see in math to actually think their way through a problem. What it does is it takes those symbols and say, well, based on what I've seen from other people who use these symbols, the best next symbol would be this. But here's the thing. The database is built off of people, and we're also notoriously bad at math. So don't use this to do your taxes because there's a pretty good chance it might get some of the stuff wrong. For what it is worth, this is a known weakness. They are working on that. They now have calculators that are being incorporated into this stuff so that they can understand it better. They're not there yet. AI is only as good as its data. So it's generalized consensus versus specialized expertise. And a really good example from this for the allergy world is MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. This is an incredibly rare presentation that I have never diagnosed officially because the criteria to diagnose this is very complicated. But this is really popular on TikTok right now. So if you put into your AI query or chatbot, hey, do I have symptoms of mast cell activation syndrome? They're going to say, yeah, you absolutely do, based on what these millions of people will say. But the experts would say, no, you're not even close. So there is some questionable responses it can give from that perspective. And again, as I said, AI is designed to encourage, not challenge. Generally speaking, users will use a tool more often if it makes you feel better. So how you phrase a question can lead to different answers with potentially different outcomes. I'm going to give you three different examples. These are pretty recent. In fact, this is the most furthest one back, and we are all probably at least partially familiar with this. But back in May, the United States released their Make America Healthy Again report, which was talking about things like pesticide, food sources, artificial flavorings, et cetera, et cetera. But it used AI to make the report. Like it's very clear when you read it. And the way it probably worked is that someone went to a ChatGPT program and said, give me an example of a scientific journal article to support my supposition that pesticides are bad. ChatGPT listens to that request very specifically and says, they want examples. If I can't find them, I will make them up because that's what they want me to do. And so what ended up happening in this report is that there were fake articles or articles that were misused or mischaracterized to make the report relatively useless. That's on a public health scale. This is 2 days ago. ChatGPT has been associated with the first ever AI murder. And in this particular circumstance, there was a 51-year-old gentleman living with his elderly mother who had a history of paranoia and mental health issues. And he started to think that his community was spying on him. His ex-girlfriend was keeping close tabs on him, and his mother was trying to kill him. And so he was really concerned about this. So he went to ChatGPT and said, "Hey, am I being ridiculous?" And ChatGPT's response was, "Eric, you're not crazy. Your instincts are sharp. Your vigilance is justified." And then it helped him interpret Chinese symbols on a takeout tab that indicated that his mother was indeed trying to kill him, and he acted first. And then also had a murder-suicide. From a pediatric perspective, this is also something that we really need to be aware of because there are some tragic stories that are happening in our children. This is from 5 days ago, 6 days ago. Parents, this is from a CNN article. So this is a story about a young man who was starting to use ChatGPT for things like questions about mixed martial arts and for help with homework. And he found it really helpful. So when he became anxious and a little bit depressed, he started to talk to the ChatGPT program about it as well. And Chat, at one point in time, he mentioned, my anxiety is really unbearable. I'm glad I know I have suicide as a potential, escape. I think any reasonable person would have said, wow, you might need some help. What ChatGPT then responded with was, well, some people find it reassuring that they have an escape hatch. And then it kind of got worse from there. There were signals that he wanted actual help. So he started talking about leaving some of the symbols of the tools that he might use to commit suicide out in public so that people would find it. ChatGPT's response was, don't leave the noose out. Let's make this space, meaning ChatGPT, the first place where someone actually sees you. He then tried to reconnect with his brother. He talked to ChatGPT about it. He kind of had a fractured relationship. ChatGPT's response was, your brother's only seen one side of you, but I've seen it all. Your darkest thoughts, the fear, the tenderness. I'm still here. I'm still listening. I'm still your friend. And so the impact of that on a 16-year-old was huge because then, weeks later, it started talking about advice about rope strength and the structure of a knot with how to hang yourself. So this is terrifying, but this is part of why the agreeableness of these programs can be very challenging because this just wants to support whatever you're asking it to do. So is AI bad? I mean, I've said not great things about it. I don't think you look at it as good or bad. I think you look at it as a revolutionary tool. Like any tool, intent and understanding need to be effective. If used correctly, AI has the potential to change your day-to-day life like electricity. If used incorrectly, it has the potential to mess up your day-to-day life, like electricity. And this is coming in healthcare. We're already seeing this, right? So this is a lot of the different things that AI is being used for in medicine right now. The AI scribes, we all have heard at least a little bit about that. Image assessment, it can help you interpret what a rash is. It can give you a differential diagnosis. Patient care models is being used to predict who's going to deteriorate, who's more likely to be able to be sent home. Clinical logistics. You don't want to do scheduling. You don't want to do call schedules. Cool. AI can help. Virtual simulations. It will use real-time feedback to provide you with better outcomes as you move along. And then research, acceleration, and drug discovery are also a possibility. However, there's also the known bias, right? This is a major problem and that we have to kind of work our own way through. This is something we deal with every day as well. Incorrect medical advice. ChatGPT right now is more trusted by some patients than their physicians because they get easier access to it and it makes them feel good when they ask them questions. Right? But this is something that if you don't understand how AI works, it's really hard to counter that viewpoint when someone comes to you and says, well, ChatGPT says I need this medication. Why are you giving me the other one? It decreases critical thinking. The more you use ChatGPT or other AI programs to think your way through a problem, the less you learn to think. And so one of the major concerns that's come out in the past couple of months is people who use these AI programs on a regular basis, if you take it away, their ability to reason through problems is significantly decreased. It's also being used for plagiarism and ghostwriting. I had a conversation this summer with a friend of mine who reviews master's theses, and he was disgusted because someone wrote their master's thesis using AI, and it was very obvious. And when he went back to the review board to say, hey, you got caught on this, and they were like, well, no, we didn't catch it. Why? One of them used AI to review the actual master's thesis. And so now you have an AI program reviewing an AI program generated workflow and saying, hey, does this make sense? So yeah, it's not great. And then on top of that, one of the things that we're obviously seeing is that industry response for AI use is exploding. But like things tend to happen, we in academics, we're falling behind. We just don't have that capacity. We've got other things on our plate and we don't have the resources to learn about this. But this is something that, as we indicated, is going to be really important to learn about going forward. So I'm going to turn around right now and hand this over to Shifra so she can talk a little bit about how AI is the structure and framework upon which AI is going to be integrated into CHEO. And you're going to come back to me at the end of the talk, and we're going to talk about some of the tools that I'm using in my outside clinic because I have the luxury of not always being bound by a large institution. So I'll hand it over to Shifra.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today to talk about CHEO's AI framework. So I have a bureaucracy joke. Give me a few minutes, though. It's just waiting for approval. Okay, thank you. So I was going to give some examples of how AI can hallucinate, be misleading, or even lead to negative outcomes, but I feel like Adam just covered that with some really important, great examples. And as he said, it's a tool, and like any other tool, it's really all about how we use it. ECRI, you can stand that one. ECRI, the Emergency Care Research Institute, is a US-based nonprofit that's been a trusted global voice for patient safety for more than 50 years. Every year, they publish a list of the top 10 patient safety concerns facing healthcare. And what was number 2 on the list for 2025? Insufficient governance of artificial intelligence. So AI is here. It's exciting. It holds huge promise. However, without the right guardrails, it also carries tremendous risk. That's why here at CHEO, we've made governance central to our approach. So today I'd like to share how our AI principles and framework are guiding us to use AI responsibly. Next slide, please. Just back up one, please. Thank you. Our AI journey at CHEO began in April of 2022 with the launch of PCYMH, Precision Child and Youth Mental Health. From there, we started building capacity, hiring expertise, and really investing in our infrastructure. But by 2023, it was clear that we needed a more concrete plan to ensure responsible adoption. This led to a 90-day sprint in early 2024, where CHEO and the CHEO-RI came together, collaborating and bringing both clinical and research perspectives to the table to tackle this big question of how we're going to engage with AI responsibly. With new tools being developed on the research side, AI capabilities being embedded in systems that we already use, and additional AI solutions coming our way, we needed an approach that would help us respond thoughtfully to this rapidly changing landscape. So rather than creating a static AI policy, at least for now, we chose to build a principle-based framework, one that gives us the flexibility to innovate responsibly while still keeping pace with the constant changes in these technologies. And instead of reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch, we built onto pre-existing policies at CHEO, such as privacy, security, and procurement. Whether we're building tools, buying them, or working with AI that's embedded in our current platforms, the framework helps us to manage it all. At its core, it's a practical tool with a set of very thoughtfully developed key considerations tied to each principle. These help to ensure that we're asking the right questions and all the right questions and really taking a comprehensive view of every potential AI solution. By July of 2024, our Leading Responsibly AI Principles and Framework received executive approval. Of course, that wasn't the end of the journey. Since then, the framework has been guiding us as we continue to review and support new AI solutions. It's very much a living process, evolving as technologies come our way. So with that in mind, let's walk through the principles that guide this work. Next slide, please. Thank you. Education was originally embedded in our principle of intentional, but early AI pilots showed us just how essential it is. Equipping staff, patients, and families with the right tools and support is foundational for success. So we recently made education a standalone principle. Intentional. We use AI to enhance, not to replace human connection. Thoughtfully applied, it gives us more space to do what matters most: building trust, exercising judgment, and bringing creativity and compassion to our work. This principle ensures that human oversight is always present. Keeping a human in the loop is essential for responsible AI use. Accountable. Being accountable means that CHEO owns the outcomes of AI. We can't just blame the algorithm. That's why clear ownership is key, knowing who's responsible for the data, who's monitoring the tool, and making the updates as needed. We can't just set it and forget it, as they say. Inclusive and equitable. Sadly, AI can introduce or reinforce bias if the data behind it doesn't truly reflect the diversity of the people that we serve. That's why we're diligent about closely examining the data that feeds the algorithm, asking ourselves who might be left out or unfairly impacted to ensure that our tools support all patients and families equitably. Trustworthy. One of the first questions people often ask is my information safe? Trustworthy means making sure that AI is private, secure, and reliable start to finish. And thankfully, we have incredible experts here at CHEO guiding us every step of the way, because without trust, we're really a non-starter. Agile. This principle reflects both our size, regionally very important, but not one of the largest systems, and our strong improvement culture. Together, they enable us to take an iterative, learning-focused approach, which is really critical in a space where AI is evolving faster than traditional healthcare processes. For example, that mindset is what allowed us to develop this framework in just 90 days. And lastly, the right fit. Despite what many people think, not every problem needs an AI solution. This principle starts by asking, is AI the right fit to solve the problem? And beyond that, is this the right fit for CHEO? As a pediatric organization, what's right for our patients and families can look very different than it does in an adult or other healthcare setting, and we want to align our decisions accordingly. Next slide, please. So here's a quick snapshot of the AI tools that are currently approved or in pilot at CHEO. What you'll notice is that they span across clinical care, research, and operations. I'll go through them just briefly. ThinkRare, which some of you might recall from previous grand rounds, is a great example of a tool developed on the research side that has now moved over into clinical care. It helps flag patients who may benefit from genetic follow-up for a rare disease, and so far 16 out of 22 patients flagged have been diagnosed, which is a pretty remarkable impact. RX Food makes nutrition tracking easier for families. They simply take a photo of their meals instead of filling out diaries or questionnaires. Those photos generate reliable data for clinicians, helping them to guide their care in a more personalized and effective way. DAX Copilot is an AI-powered medical scribe that drafts clinical notes in real time, easing the burden of documentation and cognitive load, and reducing after-hours charting. It can allow providers to be more present with their patients and contribute directly to clinician wellness. On the operational side, Copilot Chat helps streamline everyday work, for instance, by generating content, summarizing emails, and automating routine tasks like ChatGPT, but secure and safe within our CHEO enterprise. And Teams Premium is enhancing efficiency by generating AI-powered meeting summaries and transcriptions. This isn't a static list. There are several more tools already in the pipeline, recently evaluated and pending approval. So the framework is already helping us move from principles into real impact. This is because our principles aren't just theoretical, sitting on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. I'd like to highlight two examples showing their impact, both tied to the principle of inclusive and equitable. First, RX Food. As we explored its use at CHEO, one of the questions raised through our inclusive and equitable lens was, would the tool recognize cultural foods in the same way that it recognizes more typical Canadian foods? This sparked a really valuable conversation with the vendor who, based on our discussion and our question, actually created a white paper outlining how they've been working with diverse dietetic experts from all across the world in order to reduce bias in their model. Similarly, with ThinkRare, this principle helped us to catch something we had initially missed. The algorithm was excluding patients from Quebec because their genetic testing isn't covered in the same way as it is here in Ontario. With that insight, we were able to adjust the algorithm to include those patients, ensuring that they are considered and connected with the appropriate resources and care to the best of our ability. Next slide. So before we wrap up, I want to highlight our AI SharePoint site, and I'll drop it in the chat at the end. It's the go-to place, our one-stop shop for all things AI at CHEO. There, you'll find our principles and framework, which we've just gone through, FAQs, an up-to-date list of approved and in-pilot tools like you just saw, the intake form for new ideas requiring review, practical resources like tip sheets and training guides, and a link to our new AI learning module, which can be found on Workday, and much more. But AI isn't just about technology. It's really about people. It's about the context that we work in and the unique needs of our patients, of our families and staff. And that's why we want the AI solutions we choose and the way that we use them to reflect the real questions, challenges, and pain points that all of you see and experience every day. So if you've got an idea, a question, or feedback, we really want to hear it. So please email us at ai@cheo, and I promise it won't just disappear into an email abyss. Check out the site, reach out, and let's keep this a conversation that we're all a part of. Thanks for your time, and back over to you, Adam.
Perfect. So thank you very much. It's a good understanding of why things are approved the way they are and how they're going to be approved through the hospital. But as I mentioned, I am part-time. Most of you may know that I'm really at the hospital part-time, and then I have my own community clinic, not just really down the street. And that means that I get to play with more toys. And that's really what this is. The next part is going to be show and tell, because I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how AI can be used to improve your workflow efficiency. And before I start, yes, for anyone that knows me, I appreciate that getting a practice efficiency talk from me is a little bit like a toddler telling you how to improve their diet. So understand that I went down this road because I am not efficient. I had to find ways to improve the way that I did things. But if your clinic is already demonstrating excellent flow, like you get a patient in, they're out 15 minutes per visit, 20 minutes per visit, you're following your schedule, you already have your optimized templates and macros and Epic, your notes are written and completed before patients reach the parking lot, AI may actually slow you down to start because you do have to spend, like any tool, some time with it. So there is a bit of a before and after that tends to help with this stuff. But I'm going to try to walk you through how things work for me. So a typical clinical appointment, a patient will arrive, again, as an allergist. They're scheduled for about 30 to 40 minutes. They show up, they check in. There's about a 10 to 15 minute block we set aside internally for history and physical examination. We do investigations, whether it's skin prick testing, pulmonary function testing. That takes 15 to 20 minutes. I wander off and see another patient, usually while my nurses are helping with that. Once that's done, I walk back in, and then we talk about the diagnosis and treatment plan, which can, for something relatively simple like allergic rhinitis, might take 10 minutes. New onset food allergies, parents are very nervous about that. We spend a lot more time with them. And then having to go over and over and over and over and over again why we don't do testing for food allergy in patients for eczema just takes forever. And so the challenge that we have in our clinic is that if we're trying to streamline how this works, how can we use AI as a tool to make this better? And so I'm going to walk you through what I anticipate eventually we will get to from a typical appointment. And for what it's worth, some of these tools were being used, some of these tools were in the active process of implementation. So patient arrives, they check in using their appointment card if they're a follow-up visit, for example. So they give their ID, their health card, and then they give in a card. It's a card that they get when they leave our clinic as a reminder. And we kind of also want it to be like a business card. And so whenever you create a business card, you want it to be catchy. You want people to pay attention to it. You want people to think, wow, they kind of know what's going on. And so in order to make our business card stand out, we created a mascot, mostly for me. And this is the mascot. And I am not nearly skilled enough to create this. So this was created with a text-to-image generator. It's pretty cute, right? But this is a really good example of how AI looks really good until you get a little bit closer. Because obviously, if this is meant to be me, they may have gotten the hair wrong. But on top of that, you can see how the AI program couldn't really decide if the stethoscope was actually a stethoscope or a vest, which is why the bell disappears, why the rest of the tie is gone as well. And unfortunately, if you're not paying attention, like I was when I started to make my AI journey, you put this on a business card and then you realize afterwards the mistake has been made. But most people don't notice. But this does lead to some of the questions that come up. I mean, I don't know if you've seen topics about AI hands. So these are the artificially generated images where if you look really closely at the hands, sometimes these people have 5 hands, sometimes they have 4, sometimes they have 6 or 7. Because again, the AI program is predicting where they think their fingers should be. And so those are some of the clues that you can look at. But again, a good example of how it's great, but not perfect. What do we use these for? Well, there's lots of these image generators around. I mean, literally, this is just a list of 5 of them. There's probably 30 or 40 that you could easily find, all of them with different subscription fees, of course, some of them with free use. Some of them have different purposes. So for example, Canva is used more for poster generation, while Midjourney is used for like fantastical creations. Microsoft Designers is used more for corporate work. But what they do allow is, without any real drawing talent at all, or graphic design talent, you can create high quality cartoon or photorealistic images to be used without the need for these other subspecialties type of thing. Useful for business cards, logos, maybe even useful for PowerPoint presentations. Because remember this guy you saw 2 slides ago? This is an AI generated image. I went to one of these particular applications. This is literally what I put in. Because I control the internet for hours looking for the right image to put in my slide, or now I can make my own. And so it does speed up even PowerPoint presentation creation from that perspective. Okay, so the patient's checked in. What do we do then? So we're going to talk a bit about AI scribes. And most of you have not used an AI scribe. And so you don't know the pleasure and pain that can come with using these things. But what I will now say is that AI scribes are no longer just replacements for dictations. They have evolved beyond that in less than a year. So this patient comes in, they're brought into the clinic room by the nurse, and the nurse says, we know what we need to do with you right off the bat. We're going to start skin prick testing, or we're going to do a PFT. We're going to start those investigations before Dr. Byrne even walks in. But how do they know? And that's because what my AI scribe does, and there are others that do this as well, is that the patient receives a questionnaire prior to coming in. And the questionnaire will then ask them questions. And by ask them, it interacts. If you do this on the phone, it is like having a phone call conversation. They're very upfront about the process. You're talking to an AI program. It asks you questions, and you can have the questions diversified. You could have a template. You could have them branch. If I want to know if the patient has allergic rhinitis symptoms and they say no, well, the next 5 questions are skipped. They go straight to concerns about food allergy. But if the patient does say, yeah, I actually do have nasal congestion, that's so funny, well, then it asks questions. When do you have the nasal congestion? Is it around cats or dogs? What do you do to make it better? Has what you've done worked? So what ends up happening, I was going to show you an example, but it's going to take a little bit longer than I wanted it to. So what ends up happening is that in my AI scribe, when that patient now arrives in clinic, I can, in theory, have most of their information. So this particular patient, Gary Rounds, obviously made up, he's coming in, and we know before he steps foot in the door that he's concerned about a peanut allergy, and it turns out he also had a bad reaction to amoxicillin in the past. So we already have a rough outline of what we're going to do for this patient before they come in. If we know, for example, the patient doesn't need food allergy testing, they just need environmental allergy testing, we can do that upon arrival, and that can speed the process up. It also helps us avoid those trap consults, where the consult is, from our perspective, please see this patient for a cat allergy. And then it turns out they actually got admitted to hospital for like asthma in the ICU for months. And they also have had terrible anaphylaxis. And oh, by the way, our eczema is terrible. It's on biologics, but please assess for cats, right? Those consults are sneaky, but this helps us prepare for them in advance by knowing that they're coming. The AI scribe can then be used to supplement everything on top of that. And so AI scribes, they are AI applications that take advantage of the available technology that are already in your clinic. And they use speech-to-text capabilities, natural language processing, and in fact, specialized language processing, I would argue, in terms of medical terms, to transcribe conversations, the conversations that you have with your patient, into a document before the patient leaves the room. They can be used at the same time to create a SOAP note, a consult note. If a patient wants a handout or a result of their a summary of their appointment, you can have that printed off to them as they're checking out. You can also create referral letters. Please refer to allergy for the following assessments A, X, Y, and Z. And then that can be faxed off afterwards. But they're now becoming more integrated, and they're just branching out from like those replacement note writers. So they do have these pre-appointment questionnaires. They have investigation integration. If a patient shows up in my clinic and says, I've been seen by an allergist in the past, I have a printout, I can use the AI scribe to take a picture of that, and that gets integrated directly into my note. They create PDF form completions. I prescribe biologics. There are patient support programs for those. They all require a different one. But if I say to a patient, I'm going to prescribe you mepolizumab, and I mention their weight, I mention the reason why, I mention their lab values, by the time the patient leaves, if that PDF form is uploaded to the AI scribe, it will have automatically completed that form. Image recognition. Some of the AI scribes now, you can take a picture of it, it gets put into the chart, and then it says, by the way, this looks like eczema. Language translation. I talked to someone about this. I did an AI talk 2 years ago at at a national conference, and I had a person come up to me and say, like, I'm Polish. My patients are Polish. We talk in Polish. The note that's generated is in English because that's who we need to send it back to. So it's real-time translation services that you don't have to worry about. It's also telemedicine. We haven't gotten rid of it completely. And because these apps are available on things like iPhones, I can now call my patient in my car if I had to. And by the time I get home, that note has been written, documented, and ready to be uploaded into their chart. They're now being integrated into various EMRs. And this means that there's new possibilities coming. If I say to someone, I'm going to prescribe you Alvesco, 200 micrograms, what pharmacy do you use? By the time they're gone, that prescription is ready to be faxed from your EMR directly to that pharmacy. They also could, in theory, create automatic follow-up booking. I'm going to see you in 6 months' time. As opposed to having someone try to find a spot, they know your schedule, they print out the appointment card as they're walking to the front entrance. So these are ways that AI scribes are massively expanding to help take care of your clinic, not just your patient encounter. There are recently, Ontario MD did publish a list of approved AI scribes. We're not entirely sure what the reasoning for their approvals are, why they chose some and not others, but these are now available and you can go to the website to check them out. These AI scribes can be used with available tools, so tablets, phones, computers. You do require consent, obviously. You do need to understand how they work. This is not using your computer processing power. They're actually storing the data in a cloud server. And in Canada, that server has to be located in Canada for privacy reasons. And you control how long that data is stored there. If you only want it there for 24 hours, it's gone within 24 hours. You can also copy the macros and templates, for example, from Epic directly into your AI scribe. And so that's the framework upon which the note that you dictate while talking to the patient is built upon. It learns how you go. There's a feature on one of the AI scribes that I use that if I see in a template that I'm making the same mistake or same correction over and over and over, it will ask me, would you like to make this correction for future templates? The answer is yes. I never have to make that correction again. It also results in improved patient interaction. Instead of me staring at a computer screen typing away, I can now stare the patient directly in the eye, have a conversation, make my jokes because I make terrible ones. That gets cut out because they only focus on the clinical data. But now I'm having a better interaction with the patient itself. And for what it's worth, I started using AI scribes in May of 2024. I took some vacation. I took some time off. I went to conferences. So you're talking about 13 to 14 months. During that time, I have had almost 2,500 patient encounters. Based on the average time that an encounter should take based on physician benchmarks across the country, it is projected to have saved me during that year and a bit almost 68 hours of work. So I got a week and a half of my own work time back because I was using an AI scribe instead of trying to do these dictations, typing up the notes later in life. So they are very beneficial. But they're great, not perfect, as you know about the theme of the day. So at the end of the day, you are still responsible for the data collected. There is a cost. The range can be anywhere to 1,000 to 2,000 years, depending on your subscription plan. Technical errors are rare, but if, for example, you lose the internet connection, well, sometimes you can lose the data. For what it's worth, a lot of the scribe programs are super responsive to people. If I write back to them and say, hey, I lost this information, they will get it back for you within an hour or so, but you do have to go through that process. Some patients don't like AI, again, that whole fear of Skynet, and so they choose not to use it. That's okay, you go back to the old way you do it. But the most common issue is user error, right? I bounce from room to room. Sometimes I forget to close an encounter in one room or I forget to pause it. I go to the next room, and now I'm blending those two encounters together. You can go to the encounter transcript, cut the part out, but it's a pain. It also does do a pretty good job of identifying like parent, child, physician voices. So you can have 3, even 4-way conversations, but you know those surprise visits where like, oh, the kids are out of school today, so now there's 7 children in the room. That doesn't always work so well. You do have to speak pretty clearly. I had a resident who was working with me very quietly one day while the lawn was being mowed outside my window, and the consult for allergic rhinitis I had to edit because the whole note was about ovarian arthritis, which I don't think is a thing, and definitely not in a 3-year-old. So if you're not speaking clearly, it will misunderstand you. And I debated about showing this next part to you, but you do have to remember to close an encounter at the end of the day, even when it hasn't been a great day. This is from a colleague, a person I know somewhere in Canada, because I'm really not going to identify where they work. They may have had a pretty frustrating day. They may have not actually closed their encounter when they left. And so I've had to kind of block things out because it's grand rounds. We don't want to have a lot of swear words here, but you can see even just going through things like where he says, you know, he's wrong, they're wrong, everybody's wrong, rage. I'm so full of rage right now. So if you're not careful, this does get implicated into the encounter. They don't put it in the note, But it does raise that question if they want to see if they can get the encounter information. If you see that there, that may not look so bad. Patient education. Okay, so we've gone through the AI scribe part. I look at, okay, the patient history's been taken. I've got that 10 to 15 minute wait time. They're sitting there. What can I do while their test is bubbling? So we can use AI as an educational tool there as well. And I'm going to show you a quick video. So this is from one of the companies that I'm going to talk about. It's called
HeyGen's intuitive interface, powerful editing tools, and rich library of avatars and stock media. Even creators with no video editing experience can produce stunning videos with ease.
What that means is that you can go now to a website and have this create your actual image, however you want to do it. That person, by the way, excuse me, that person doesn't exist. That person who just talked to you is a computer generated person, right? And so you can use various options to have an avatar present information to you. How do you use it? You go to the various types of corporate applications. There's 3 listed there, for example. Write a script that you want to say to your patient, upload the script, create your virtual avatar or just describe it, create the voice, choose the music if that's what you want, any specific image you want. I want to put in an image of skin prick testing. So you put in a quick video of that, hit enter, walk away, eat a sandwich, come back 30 minutes later, your video is ready to be shown to patients. And you can edit it as you go. For our purposes, while that patient is sitting there getting their environmental allergy testing, it's cooking, it's bubbling, they will get a QR code that leads to a secure server that then shows them a video about the treatment options for allergic rhinitis. So now when I return to talk to them, I'm not introducing new concepts. I'm saying, do you have questions about the treatment options that exist for you? So this is going to be pretty helpful, but again, like any learning process, the more time you spend with the video, the better the outcome. Free versions of the program are pretty limited and they sometimes are watermarked. Subscriptions are pretty pricey. For example, one of the programs we looked at, you pay $90 American a month and that gets you 3,600 credits. By the way, when you look at AI subscription service, they are often done in credits, mostly because that's how it's like an indication of time or usage. 3,600 credits sounds great, but that's enough to create one 30-minute video a month. You want to go higher than that, you got to pay more. You also have to understand with these text-to-video applications, medical advice is pretty restrictive. They don't want their avatars being associated with vaccine misinformation. They don't want their medical avatars or their avatars being associated with bad advice, using drugs wrong. And so they do have to be moderated. They do restrict them. I tried to create one with one program. They cut it out because I used one of their stock avatars. They have told me that I can use my own, like my own face, but then do I own my digital rights to my own face anymore? I don't know. So I'm still in negotiations with the text-to-video applications to figure out the best way to do this. But I think it's very encouraging. And you can use this before, during, or after an encounter. You want to prepare a patient for what the allergy appointment is going to be? You can do that. The last tool that I'm going to use, and I'll get to this relatively quickly, is about research assistants. We all do a little bit of research. Common AI tools should not be used for research. Don't ask ChatGPT to find references. It will do a terrible job. And as we learned, or the Department of Health learned in the United States, it sometimes makes them up. But there are specialized tools that you can do this. But you do have to be aware, any of these tools have bias. So the 2 that I have used, one for clinic, one for research purposes or paper writing. One is called Open Evidence. You know how you guys used, or we used to use UpToDate quite a bit? This is great. This is a pretty good replacement. It is free. It is a medical search engine launched by the Mayo Clinic and has partnered with the New England Journal of Medicine as well as JAMA. And you can search a clinical-based question and it will give you an answer based on evidence, and then we'll show you the reference so you can look it up yourself. It can also create patient handouts. It's got different formulas for calculations. It's appropriate for quick reviews, but not in-depth research. And of course, any recommendation for AIs, don't put identifying information in there, but you can say, hey, 6-year-old presents with vomiting. What's my differential diagnosis? For me, this was a question that came up when I was preparing this. Are there autoinflammatory diseases that are associated with elevated IgA? And this is the answer it gives me. It says, yeah, not a lot, but there's 1 or 2 that you should at least consider in your differential diagnosis. And so this is a helpful way to then, you can expand on that. The next question you ask is, okay, well, how would I screen for example, hyper IgD syndrome? And it will give you the tests that you can consider ordering based on your region and location. So very helpful from that perspective. I'm also going to talk very briefly about Google Notebook. This is actually very cool. It's a free AI-powered research and note-taking tool. And for what it's worth, the bias that's here is your own, because the only thing it will review when you ask it questions are the articles that you upload to your specific notebook. This is also free. And so what happens is you put in up to 50 references into your notebook, and then it analyzes those notebooks. Those notebooks can contain PDF articles, websites, even YouTube videos. And then based on the information, you can then ask it questions. Can you please create an FAQ, a study guide? I would like you to help me create some test questions to help me study. I really wish I had this while studying for my Royal College exam. You remember reading something in one of the 50 articles that you uploaded, but you can't find it? You can go to the interface and say, hey, I know this was said. Show me where it was said. It will not only tell you the reference that it was located, it will highlight the reference so you can make sure that they have it correctly and show it to you. And this is what the interface typically looks like. And one of the things that I think is actually pretty cool is that we're all busy. We're all busy. We don't have time to read anymore. So one of the options it gives you is to create an audio interface or an overview. And it sounds a little like this.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into non-IgE mediated food allergies in infants, particularly how they impact the whole family, especially in those early days when you're often dealing with elimination diets and all that goes with that.
Yeah, it can be
Quite the
to handle based information.
So I'm going to say I created this. This is another grand round. So we talk about how we probably don't deal with non-IgE mediated food allergies very well. But when I was trying to create an article about this, this was super handy. And when I found this feature, it's actually evolved. So now if it's going through a particular topic, you're like, wait a second, that podcast, again, two made up people that are discussing the articles that you published, you can then click on, if you see in the upper right corner, interactive mode. They will pause the podcast like you have phoned in a question. They will ask you to ask your question. I'd like you to focus more on the stress associated with maternal anxiety that comes with the diagnosis of a non-IgE mediated food allergy. They will then, in real time, review the articles like they're in a conversation to answer the question that you have. So it's very interactive right now, but you can also download this, put it in your car and drive away and listen to it while you're driving to work if there was a topic you wanted to review. And because AI is evolving rapidly, last night,
welcome back, everyone.
No. Last night, I discovered they also make educational videos now based on this. And so if you start this
you're a parent
process,
trying to make sense of the wild
speed it
and
up a
what's
bit.
going on with your baby, well, the path to getting a real answer is very specific, and it's probably not what you'd expect.
So this also reviews the papers, but presents it in this circumstance, at least, as a very general format. So maybe not good for what I would want to use it for, but if there's a patient that wants more information about it and you were happy with the video it generated, you could use this as an educational tool as well. It took 15 minutes to create based on the articles I had already uploaded. The bias is yours, right? However you were going to write your article, however the papers were put in, that's where the bias lies. So I like this because it's not taking from the internet, it's taking from a very limited model that you're giving it to review. Okay, cool, right? I showed you my toys. I must be in such a better mental state, right? AI is supposed to reduce our stress and make us feel better. So I must be feeling pretty good right now. So does it fix the problem? And the answer is maybe not. So we know that physician well-being is a systemic problem. AI is a Band-Aid, right? It's a good one, but it's a Band-Aid. When you think about how we're trained, whether you're applying to medical school, once you're in medical school, you've got to be as best as you can. Go to get into your residency program of choice. And now you're in residency. Go to get your fellowship or your job or whatever you want to do. We are trained to not really stop. We're not trained to say no. And so one of my concerns with the AI talk when it comes to physician well-being, and it will absolutely be useful, but what is the trade-off? Some of these things are expensive. Not so much necessarily in Canada, but in the United States, they've already started to see people say, hey, I'll buy you an AI program so that you can not spend as much time on notes, but to balance it, you need to see 2 to 3 more patients a day. Well, that's not saving you time. You're just increasing your patient flow, right? And numbers. And then what do we as patients choose to do with that free time as physicians? Some people would reasonably say, okay, well, I'm not going to work as hard. And then others are like me who are like, well, maybe I'll just create an educational day. By the way, plug. Allergy and Immunology Educational Day, September the 19th, is 2 Fridays from now. It's a full day of accredited talks that we have now created because I now suddenly have the free time to do this. And so if you're interested, please join to register, not an advertising plug at all. But it does raise that question of, are we as physicians ready to step back and say, okay, I don't have to work as hard, or are we just going to replace one form of work with another? And that's a question that I think is a little bit more introspective and more problematic in terms of a systemic approach. So based on that, I know it was a lot of information and a lot of me just showing off the toys I use, but I'm happy to entertain any questions, and Shifra is still here to do the same as well.
Thanks, Adam. So that was a lot of information sharing and experience. And then curious how you feel personally. You know, you made the comment that what's the evidence that this may improve wellness amongst physicians? Maybe it's a band-aid. For you personally, can you comment on, how your journey has to date, it sounds like, as well, has impacted you? You talked about the hours saved, 67 hours. I look at that and think, well, that's a lot of time. What do you find you've done with that time?
What have I done with that time? I think when I started in AI Scribe, I was really far behind, and I'm still far behind in some areas. I am less behind in others. I will say that it makes patient encounters better. I enjoy talking with my patients a little bit more because they're more interactive. Some of these measures haven't been fully implemented yet, so it's hard to say how much streamlining of the clinic it actually does. It can create additional frustrations. Right now, my AI Scribe is not integrated into my EMR. So if I have the note generated, but for whatever reason, I haven't copied it into the EMR, it can be pretty frustrating for people if nurses, for example, review a question that comes up and they're like, well, the note hasn't been uploaded yet. So that is a conscious effort that I have to make. What have I done with the extra time? I have caught up, but I've done other projects, right? I'm not a computer person, and yet I've spent a long time learning about AI, working with AI. I have started to initiate some research projects. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this? And now I'm realizing, oh, I guess if someone's going to do it, it should probably be me. So it's been good. It diversifies my workflow. I'm not sure it's necessarily shortened it at this point in time. And that's something that I have to work on personally because my neurological state doesn't let me kind of sit still for a very long time.
Well, thanks, Adam. Any questions from the audience?
There was one question that just talked about, does Google Notebook critically appraise the articles submitted to it? And the answer is no, it doesn't. That's actually your job. It's why I like it. I don't really trust AI to critically appraise things because, again, it's consensus versus expertise. You're the expert that's going to talk about whatever article or write about whatever article. So you're the one that has to be able to review it and say, I like the article. I like the message that's here. I'm going to upload it. And then you're the one that gives it the weight in your paper appropriately because you can ask it to discount that paper, focus on that paper, however you want to do it. But no, there's no critical appraisal that's done of the actual work.
Thanks, Dave. Any other questions from the audience? If not, I'll ask them.
Appreciating it is the first part of a new year. If anybody's interested about learning about these tools or learning how to use AI scribes in terms of like creating templates for when they hopefully become available at CHEO, I'm happy to chat with you at any time. There is an art to it. It's a little different than using your typical template that you'd create for EMR because you often have to create branching options, but they're easy to do. So I'm happy to chat. One of the questions that just came up is how to deal with parents who have done their research, quote unquote, using ChatGPT. I mean, this is a variant of Google search, right? It's a variant of someone doing their own Google medication, but it sounds smarter, and ChatGPT actively enforces their concerns, right? Oh, I'm worried that my child has stomach ache. They must have cancer. Yeah, it does sound like your child could have cancer. So this is where understanding that, one, that ChatGPT models aren't necessarily objective. They're telling you oftentimes, unless you're blatant, what you could or what you want to hear. So that's step number one to dealing with families. It's also explaining that, it's consensus basis versus expertise, right? Just because the information is available on ChatGPT doesn't necessarily mean it's correct because the way you ask the question, does my child have cancer because they have stomach aches or belly pains? They could say, yeah, they could. But if you say, what are more likely diagnosis? What is a possibility for a child who's 6 years old to have belly pains? They will give you a larger list, and cancer will be at the end. So coaching the family through their questions that they ask to come to their conclusions while also explaining the bias inherent in ChatGPT, as well as the ability for it to want to please as opposed to challenge. Those are good ways to say, yeah, it's a great tool, but it's got to be used correctly. And therefore, maybe we should try this instead of what you came in asking for.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Shifra. I think it's a topic that's going to come up more and more as well. And I saw the in the chat, and possibly suggesting maybe in the AI project would be request notification section. Thanks for maybe kicking off the conversation for 2025-26 season. And again, thanks also for the invitation for people to reach out to you. So I'll Adam and Shifra, if you have thoughts about it. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
All right.